Did we finish Isay last time? I think we're almost at the end. No. Okay, so I think we're up to Ela Menucha, Ela Shemenucha. The Rebbe brought that in the Maamar of the Mittler Rebbe, there's two different explanations. In the beginning of the Maamar, the Mittler Rebbe says that both Chaya and Yechida are an inyan of Padah BeShalom. That Milchama, the aspect of Milchama that's there in davening, is when it's Naran, meaning the part of davening that deals with the Keiches Pnimiyim, with the faculties, with explaining and convincing the Nefesh HaBahamis to love Hashem. And Chaya Yechida, even Chaya, which is a ratzin that's l'mayla mitam, which is an irrational desire for elikus, is under the category of Padah BeShalom. But later in the Maamar, the Mittler Rebbe explains, like we explained in the beginning of this Maamar, that the true Padah BeShalom is only when it's Yechida, only the love that comes from Yechida. And the Rebbe brought an example in this ice of having two different levels, two different categories of Shalom. The Rebbe brought that we find that David HaMelech, on the one hand, was told that he's disqualified from building the Beis HaMikdash because of the fact that he fought wars. And nevertheless, we find that David HaMelech was the one who drew up the plans for the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe said, because David HaMelech, when he finished his wars, when he completed his wars, was, from one perspective, you can consider it Shalom. He no longer had any enemies. He was freed from his enemies. So that could be considered Shalom. And because David HaMelech had one aspect of Shalom, that was enough to qualify him to be able to write the plans for the Beis HaMikdash. At the same time, it's not the true Shalom. It's not the ultimate Shalom. Because since it's a Shalom that needed a war to be fought to reach there, it's not the real Shalom. The real Shalom was the way it was by Shlomo HaMelech, that was Ish Menucha Be'etzem, that was inherently Shalom. There was no possibility of an enemy opposing him. And that's the Shalom of Yechida and davening, where there's no possibility of being an enemy. So they're both different levels of Shalom. So, what?
There's no possibility and it's not a war.
Correct.
Oh, okay. That's it.
And no, by David HaMelech, the peace that David HaMelech reached was after a war. He had to fight a war, and because he was the victor, so he had peace. That's not the ultimate Shalom. So here the Rebbe is going back and saying those are the two levels in davening, and that's why in one part of the Maamar, the Mittler Rebbe describes Chaya, which is an overpowering love of the Eibishter that causes that the Nefesh HaBahamis should back off. So that's considered, in a sense, Shalom because there's no actual war, but it's not the ultimate Shalom. So he says, Ela Shemenucha Zu, almost the last few lines of Eishei. He says, the Menucha of Chaya, compared to Nefesh Ruach Neshama, compared to a peace that comes from convincing and engaging the Nefesh HaBahamis, compared to that, it's called Shalom. So the Rebbe explained, because by Naran, by the level of using your faculties to actually work and convince and influence the Nefesh HaBahamis, that's a real engagement. That's a real dealing, coming close with the Nefesh HaBahamis. Compared to that, Chaya is considered Shalom, because Chaya was that you feel such an intense love of the Nefesh HaLekis that the Nefesh HaBahamis is not going to stand up, it's not going to speak. So therefore, in one sense, that's Shalom. Ella. So now we're explaining the other side, why in one sense that's not the ultimate Shalom. It says, Ella Shemenucha Zu, this peace, this tranquility that comes from the Aveda and the level of Chaya, Hi loy Menucha Be'etzem, it's not inherently Menucha, it's not inherently peace, it's not in essence peace. It's a peace rak mitzat tagbeires haratzim nefesh halikis. It's a peace that really, what's the method that that's reached? It's because the person at that level feels so strongly and so intensely his nefesh halikis that the nefesh HaBahamis backs off. So in a sense, what really happened was there was an overpowering. There was an invisible struggle. There was an unrecognized struggle. And therefore, this is similar, bidugmas hamenucha de David, shahavaya hiniach le mikol evav. Just like we find by David that although in the end he had a state of peace, but that was a peace that needed a fight to reach that peace. And therefore it wasn't good enough, even at that stage in his life, for David to be eligible to build the Beis HaMikdash. Shamenucha shalei haisa mitzad zeh shenatzach kol ha-milchama, the peace that David reached then was through winning the war. So too by Chaya, a person can feel such a strong love to the Eibishter because the love is merely overpowering the nefesh habahamis. Even though the person doesn't have an actual struggle, that's called a peace that came from fighting a war, in one sense. And that's why it's not the true and ultimate shalom. Therefore, further in the Maamar of the Mittler Rebbe, he explains that really in a deeper sense, the only ultimate shalom is with Yechida, because only there is it can be described as a shalom that doesn't depend on a struggle, on a war at all. So that's inherently shalom, it's inherently peaceful. The bittul haratzein is the nefesh habahamis that results from gilui hayechida, from this avodah of the person accessing and feeling his yechida shabenefesh. Hu lo yishal yidei gilui hayechida nasa bittul haratzein. There, the way it works is not that the gilui hayechida is so powerful that it brings about. It's not in an active way. It's not that there has to be some effect, some influence of gilui hayechida that causes that the ritzenis of the nefesh habahamis should be annulled. Kiyem shemitzad hayechida she'ein kenegda le'uma zeh ein mokim melachatchila l'ritzenis zarim. There, when a person reaches the level of yechida, when he accesses his yechida, when he experiences his yechida shebenefesh, that the yechida is the level that ein kenegda le'uma zeh, like we said in the beginning of the Maamar. There is no le'uma zeh. So there, the nefesh habahamis and the desires and the agenda of the nefesh habahamis doesn't have to be overpowered even in a subtle way. There's no possibility of nefesh habahamis. There's no room for nefesh habahamis. It doesn't exist. So there, that's inherently peace. There's not a possibility for a struggle. There's not even an option for having to overpower.
Does he say how we can access that level?
Not in this Maamar. He does say, he's going to say later on, but that definitely it's something that is accessible to every single person. Yeah. That's the V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol moedecha that we say every day in Shema. The b'chol moedecha is Gilui HaYechida that he mentioned earlier in the Maamar. B'dugmas, this menucha, this peace that comes from Gilui HaYechida, b'dugmas ha-menucha de Shloima is similar to the peace that was by Shloima HaMalach, that the Gilui, the kingship of Shlomo was in such a manner, he didn't have to fight a war. Ela menucha be'etzem, there was no possibility of anyone opposing him. And like he said in the beginning of the Maamar, in truth, the true Padah BeShalom is the way it will be la'ased lavi. So we said in the Maamar, there's different levels of Padah BeShalom. There's different levels of a peaceful victory and a peaceful liberation. In a general sense, a general way of looking at it, so Chaya, when someone feels such an overpowering love that's beyond his seichel, so he's not going to feel what his nefesh habahamis wants. In a sense, that's shalom because he doesn't have to actively fight his nefesh habahamis. But it's not a true shalom because there is the possibility for the nefesh habahamis. There's a subtle sense of a struggle. And then there's Yechida. Yechida, when a person reaches the B'chol Meidecha, the level of Yechida, then that's true and essential Shalom. Similarly, we said, there's the Shalom the way it was by David HaMelech after he won his wars. In a subtle sense, that could be a level of Shalom. But the true Shalom is the way it was by Shlomo HaMelech, that's inherently peaceful. Similarly, earlier in the Maamar, we said there's Mesiras Nefesh, the way it is in the level of B'chol Levavcha, the way it is in the level of B'chol Nafshecha. B'chol Nafshecha is Chaya. That's also an aspect of Mesiras Nefesh. The Gemara says B'chol Nafshecha is Afilu Neitlas Nafshecha. But the real and true and ultimate Mesiras Nefesh is B'chol Meidecha, because there's no possibility of being otherwise. It's impossible for the person not to be Meser Nefesh. It's not his choice. That therefore corresponds with the Shalom the way it is Mitzad Yechida. So in all these areas we're seeing there's Padah BeShalom, but depending on how specific you want to be, depending on how deep you want to look at it, there's different levels that could be considered under the general umbrella of Padah BeShalom, or what's the real and ultimate Padah BeShalom.
Generally, usually there is an event that triggers such a Padah Shalom. In other words, there is normally some kind of milchama as opposed to just
To reach Yechida,
yeah.
Yechida doesn't have to come.
The question, I can't hear it.
He was asking if Gilui HaYechida results from a war.
Yeah.
So by Shlomo HaMelech there was no war. It wasn't that Shlomo HaMelech came as a result of David HaMelech. His father fought wars. By Shlomo, that's what we're saying. His peace wasn't because of David HaMelech's wars. His peace, his name was Shlomo. He was essentially and inherently a king of peace. His kingdom was one that's how the Eibishter made him. That's why he's described as Shlomo. And that's why we're saying his peace was not comparable to what David HaMelech was after he fought his wars. This is an inherent peace. So really, Gilui HaYechida, when we'll know how to access the Yechida, is not something that first we fight a war and then we come to Gilui HaYechida. When a person is the level of Gilui HaYechida, however he reaches that, it's Yechida. It's not because he had to overcome something.
So the David's avoider wasn't had no part in Shlomo.
Did it have a part of Shlomo HaMelech? According to what we're learning over here, seemingly it wasn't a preparation. But maybe it was a preparation in the sense that the world works with Eshtalshus in stages. But not that Shlomo HaMelech was a direct result.
The kingdom came from David.
For sure, that was his yichus. Ois vav. V'hinei al derech zeh, just like it is with Padah BeShalom, that there's levels of Padah BeShalom, and there's levels that in a general sense could be considered Shalom, but more specifically, it's not the real Shalom. So too, says the Rebbe is going to explain, there's levels in Milchama, there's levels in the struggle. Al derech zehu ba'aveda shebederech Milchama, when we say that there's P'diya b'derech Milchama, that generally what we said until now is the real milchama is naran, is the part of davening where we have to rationally engage our nefesh habahamis and convince our nefesh habahamis to change its mind about its approach to godliness. That's a milchama because of its engagement. But when we get more specific, the Rebbe says there's more levels, that's not the ultimate milchama. Just like we said there's a level that's not the ultimate shalom, there's a level not the ultimate milchama. Says there's kama v'kama dargas, there's levels in the milchama. The ha-milchama shebitfila, till now we said, and the Rebbe brought earlier in many Maamarim, that is the example of a p'tiyah b'derech milchama, is davening. Because in davening the person is engaging and thinking about godliness in terms that have to be able to influence and be convincing to the nefesh habahamis. So that's an engagement, that's a struggle. But really, says the Rebbe, now if we look at it deeper, that's not a real milchama. The milchama shebitfila, the war in davening, that davening is definitely an aspect of a war, like the Zohar says, and we quoted earlier, Shas tzloisa, Shas kirva, the time of davening is a time of war. So this is a war with the nefesh habahamis. Nevertheless, it's not really, when we look deeper, that's not really a milchama. Because kivan shebe eis hatfila. Since at the time of davening, hu mufshat me'inyanei ha'elam, the person is not really, during davening, engaged with worldly desires or with worldly perspective. On the contrary, when a person is davening, he's on a higher level, he's connected with the Eibishter. The reason why we called it a milchama is because during davening, he's thinking about godliness in terms, in a vocabulary, in a manner that's communicable with the nefesh habahamis. But he's not really engaged, he's higher than the nefesh habahamis. He's mufshat. He's detached, he's removed me'inyanei ha'elam. He's removed from worldly matters. So that's not a real struggle. He doesn't have to struggle, he's above it. Vas askus shaloi, the aspect of engagement, the aspect of milchama that we're describing it as, is because his involvement is lizboinim b'inyanei alikus, to think about godliness, and to awaken by himself that the nefesh habahamis should love and fear God because of its understanding of the concepts that he's explaining.
May I ask a question, please? Yeah. When we counting the Amida, we say with Wagner, we wish that the sick should be healthy. We say BeShalom, that area we wish that we should be and this is in the physical, not in the spiritual.
100%.
Now he's saying that we don't think like that. But we do. I do.
Of course. No. You misunderstood. We're thinking about the physical, not just by Shemoneh Esrei, even by davening before that, the whole Psuki de Zimra. You're speaking about Remes, V'tzipar Kanef, about the creatures. You're all speaking about physical.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but what we're describing, we're speaking about physical. We're speaking about the greatness of the Eibishter because of the way he nourishes worldly creatures.
I'm asking for people that are sick to be healthy.
Correct.
Nothing to do with my love for Hashem.
Physical.
Sorry. Physical,
Yeah, I'm telling you, even in davening before that, the whole Psuki de Zimra, all the Halalukas, you're talking about the way Hashem runs the world in a physical sense. He makes the sun and the moon and the creatures. Physical. The earlier part is also physical. Of course. You're talking about the physical world. What we're saying over here is that the person is thinking about the way Hashem takes care of the physical world. The person is in a spiritual state at that time. When you're standing Shemoneh Esrei, you're completely bottled to the Eibishter. You're not at this time thinking about a juicy steak. You're thinking about Hashem. And you're thinking about how you're standing in front of Hashem and He should give me enough money to buy a juicy steak, or enough money to buy a good house, enough money to have good physical things. But my state now, I'm removed. When you're standing in davening, you're not right now, you're far from eating your meal. You're standing in front of the king and begging him to give you what you need, and afterwards you'll be able to enjoy your meal. So therefore the person who's davening is detached from the world. Not that he's not speaking about Gashmis, he is speaking about physical things. But he's speaking about physical things in a state that he's not fighting with the desire. When you're eating, you're right now tasting the food. So you have to actually struggle that you shouldn't get drowned by the physical desires, by the physical taste. While I'm davening, I don't have that struggle because I'm removed from that taste. I'm talking to the Eibishter, I'm standing, I'm thinking about what it means to stand in front of the king. And what am I asking him for my physical needs? But that's a whole different kind of engagement. What?
How about you,
Say that in English, please.
How about your disturbing thoughts?
Yeah, so you have to struggle with disturbing thoughts by davening also by any time. But that's not because of davening. That means a person could theoretically daven and not have disturbing thoughts. That's not that having to daven necessitates that I should have this engagement. What we're looking now is for the definition of davening to be Maamar Shalom. We have our side problem that we have this struggle. That's our separate work. That's not the definition. That's not the definition of davening. Ella shehaz beinenus v'ahava yirat shichis liyis be'efen. Said, why, in what sense do we consider davening a milchama? Because the involvement, the thinking about Hashem in davening has to be in a manner sheyemusa gam b'seichel denefesh habahamis, that it should be grasped. It should be comprehensible to the nefesh habahamis. So the person has to bring it down. That's the aspect of engagement. But the person himself is not engaged. The state of the person who's davening, when I'm davening, that's my highest point during the day. Me, myself, the person who's davening is on his highest level. He's as removed as he can get from Gashmis. When he's eating the steak, he's not then thinking about asking the Eibishter for the steak, but he's actually tasting it. Then he's involved in it, he's engrossed in it. So therefore, because davening, the state of the person who's davening is removed, is detached, so because of that, it's not the ultimate war, it's not the real true struggle. V'nikra b'shem cherev shel shalom. And the Rebbe brings, we have a concept in Chazal. It says in the pasuk in Bechukeisai, Hashem promises, one of the promises is, v'cherev leisaver ba'artzachem, that no sword will go through your land. In Bechukeisai telechu, when we deserve good things, so we'll be spared a sword. So Chazal, the Gemara says that we're not just being spared a war, we're being spared a sword. It says, afilu cherev shel shalom. Even soldiers who are going through with their swords in a peaceful way, that's also threatening to the city that they pass through. We're going to be spared that even. So in Chassidus it says, what's cherev shel shalom? It's an aspect of cherev. It's a peaceful war. He says that's what davening is. And though on the one hand we're considering davening a war, but it's a war that's a cherev shel shalom. It's a war that's not an actual struggle because the person is not really engaged with Gashmias. He's detached from Gashmias, but he's thinking about godliness in a way that it's comprehensible to his Gashmiastic side.
Yet we're struggling with this word Muhammad.
What?
We're struggling with this word Muhammad. We don't seem to be able to, we're trying to delineate and trying to delineate, but we're still using the word.
It's a relative, yeah, that's what we're saying, it's real. So it is one aspect, Muhammad, that's what we're going to say.
Isn't Hitbadudut, how does it compare on a level to Tfilah, Hitbadudut? Because prayer, Tfilah, is being done 3 times a day. You're reading from a book, the exact same thing 3 times a day. It's a perfect recipe to have your head, when you're reading the Amidah, and you say, oh my God, I'm here already. My head went off to something else, and it came back, and I'm at Shomer Tefillah. It's because it's so, we do it like anything else in life.
Well, this is what Davido said. This is our personal struggle. Every person has a personal struggle to have the right thoughts and the right intentions during davening.
What they do, you're talking directly to the Eibishter. Directly, it's there's no way your head can go somewhere else because you're talking to Hashem.
Or you're not talking at all to Hashem. Who decided that you're talking to Hashem? We have our Anshe Knesset Agdela, our Chazal, gave us the exact directions, the prescription, and the guidance of how do we talk to Hashem. Now, our preparation and our zbid, our working on our concentration, that we have to add to that. But the talking to Hashem aspect, that's when it's done according to the prescription and according to the guidance of our sages who knew how does one talk to Hashem. It says there was one of the Rebbes, I forget who, one of the early Rebbes, for Chassidish Rebbes, he once spoke to his Chassidim, and he said that when someone abstains from saying any sheker, any falsehood for 30 days, I think he said, so then this person will merit to see Eliyahu Navi, or he promised big things. So there was one chassid, he decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. 30 days, I'll figure out, I can manage that. He went and he locked himself in a room for 30 days. He's locked in a room, he's not going to say any falsehood. And he had his wife pass him in the food. And so then there was a whole story. In the end of the 30 days, there some guy knocked on his door. He ended up, just in the last hour, he said a falsehood. But he went back to his Rebbe, and his Rebbe said to him, you misunderstood me. He said, Hashem caused your efforts not to work because you misunderstood the whole idea. He said, that's no big deal to be locked in a room and not say anything false. That anyone could do. The idea is that you're in the world and you deal with people, and your dealing is in a way that's with ultimate truth. So in davening, in a sense, we're thinking about the world, but we're thinking about the world locked in our room. We're locked in our state of davening. Tefillah, as Milash Chassidus says, is attachment to Hashem, a teifel klicheres. So that's not a real, it's not a genuine struggle. Whereas there, the genuine struggle is now, like he's going to say, V'avoda b'derech milchama. What's even more of a real milchama? What's more of a real struggle, even compared to davening? He be'ikir b'shas ha'achila shtiya, is by eating and drinking, by actually eating the steak. When someone's eating and drinking, so there we also find in Chazal, we find that the Zayar refers to that as a milchama. And we're saying when the Zayar refers to that as a milchama, that's more specifically, it's more of a real milchama, just like we said with Shalom, that there's the general Shalom and the more specific. What does the Zayar say? It says, Nama apum char b'leichel. Eat your bread on the face, on the tip of your sword. Eat your bread with your sword. That means that the eating of bread, eating a meal, is an act of a war, is fighting a war in order that it should be in the right way. The same thing, any mundane pursuits that we're involved in, any mundane matters that we're involved in, there is an actual struggle. Because when I'm eating, I'm not just thinking about the food like I'm doing by Baruch Aleinu. I'm actually eating it. I'm actually tasting it. I'm actually involved in it. And at the same time, I have to be focusing on doing this for the sake of the Eibishter. There is a real engagement. There is a real struggle, much more of a struggle, much more of an engagement than it is by davening when the person is able to remove himself. It says that the Rabbi Rab Zusha Mianipali, he was very, very poor. He lived with tremendous suffering and poverty and everything. That's the Rebbe says a sikh about it. How he once said that he was the example of accepting everything in a good way. So it says once before Sukkot for 3 days there wasn't a morsel of food in his house. And he went to shul the night of Sukkot, first night of Yantif, and he wasn't rushing to come home because he had nothing to come home for. The house was dark, there was nothing there. And what happened was, in the end, his wife was cleaning the house before Yantif to prepare for Yantif anyways, and she found in one of the clothings a precious coin, and she sold it. She was able to buy some food. So when Reb Zisha came home, instead of finding everything dark, there was lights in the sukkah, and there was a challah and potatoes, a meal for Sudas Yantif. So he was very happy, and he came in and he made kiddush, and he started eating the meal. In the middle of eating the meal, he suddenly stopped. And he said to himself, Zusha, the Torah says that on Sukkot, you're not allowed to eat outside of the Sukkah. You could only eat in the Sukkah. He said, Zusha, you're not sitting in the Sukkah, you're sitting in the plate of potatoes. So he stopped eating. He didn't eat anymore. So when we're eating, there you're actually in the food. You're immersed in the food. You're involved in it. There is a real engagement. There is the real milchama that I have to fight, that my intention and my goal should be for the Eibishter, which is much easier by davening, that it's for the Eibishter that I'm asking, the Baruch Aleinu, the Rafeinu, and all the other things. We have to stop.
Couple minutes. 2:46.
Ubazeh gufa, and even in Sarchei Aguf, he says more specifically, the real milchama is not even eating and drinking. Ubazeh gufa, even in the mundane involvements, Iker ha-milchama hi b'shas ha'esek b'masa u'matan mischer. When is the true milchama? Even in mundane matters, is involvement in business. Ki ha-milchama da'achila v'al-derech ze b'shar tzarchei haguf. What is the milchama when in eating? The milchama is she'achila se'tia l'shem shamayim v'lei l'males taivas nafshi. His struggle is that I should be eating the way the Eibishter wants me to eat. I should be eating for the sake of Hashem, and I shouldn't get caught up in my enjoyments. I shouldn't be eating for my taivas. Like Reb Zisha said, I shouldn't be drowning in the plate. But what is that struggle? Hainu shaloichem neged hataiva v'hatainik shebahamaychel. The fight is that I want to push away the physical attraction and appeal and enjoyment of the food. So I'm separating myself from it. Even though I'm tasting it, but the fight is keep it away from me. Don't get caught up in it. Don't get entangled in it. So I'm not the true meaning, the definition of milchama is hislapshus, engagement. By eating, I'm not truly engaged, because the fight is to separate, not to be actually embracing it. Where is the true engagement? It comes to business. There has to be engagement, the full-fledged engagement. Business means that I'm really thinking about the business to some degree. I have to be making sure that I'm doing it honestly and correctly and appropriately. So there is the true milchama, that in my involvement in business, I have to be actually thinking about the business, not like by food that I'm trying to push aside the physical taste and the physical enjoyment. No, I'm actually thinking about the rules of the business and the proper way to do it. And with that, I have to be engaged in the business for the sake of the Eibishter. That's a struggle that has the ultimate engagement. He says, the involvement in Torah, in business, has to be according to Torah with hislapshus, has to be according to Torah with involvement, with engagement, with actually connecting with it, Nasasa v'nasata be'emuna. The question that they ask a person after 120 is, was your involvement in business faithful, honest? So he has to be knowing what he's doing and thinking about what he's doing, not detaching himself from it, not ignoring it, not trying to separate himself from it. And therefore, there is the ultimate Muhammad. And he's going to say that's why this is the main Avodas Abiram. Okay, we'll do that next time.